Well, we're going to go to our keynote speaker now. Our keynote speaker is Alistair Anderson. Alistair is a musician, first and foremost. He plays Northumbrian small pipes and concertina. He's a teacher. He's probably responsible for a lot of people taking up the concertina in England and in Scotland over the past years. More recently, he was responsible, along with Ros Rigby, for setting up the folk education programme called Folkworks in the northeast of England. And out of that came a very ambitious multi-million-pound project, construction project, which resulted in the creation of the Sage, a multiple arts centre on the banks of the River Tyne in Gateshead in the northeast of England. Alistair's also a composer, has recorded prolifically, and has always got an interesting take on the issues that face us in the folk community. So over to you, Alistair. Alistair Anderson.
Hi, thanks very much, and thanks all of you for asking me to talk to this exciting body, the European Folk Network. I'm afraid I'm going to read from my notes, because if I don't, I shall wander off into tangents. Anybody who's heard me speak before, and then I'll not stick to time. So the thoughts I'll share today are definitely personal. I was a dancer long before I picked up an instrument, and some of my most life-changing musical experiences have been listening to great ballad singers. However, as David said, I'm best known as an instrumentalist, and many of the examples I might pick to illustrate points will be drawn from instrumental traditions, but undoubtedly parallel examples can be found from dance and song. I always found the warmth and generosity of everybody I've come across in this field, especially the older traditional musicians, singers and dancers, to be a complete inspiration. Today then, I just want to stimulate thinking and pose some questions that might just help as we come to discuss ways ahead. Now, while this is a keynote speech, just as modulating away from the home key, just as dissonance can be important creative parts of music making, I believe that if you disagree with things I'm saying, that's great. That will help move things forward. So do feel free to disagree with anything I say. At first, I'd like to look at the huge complexity and richness of the traditions we all love. I feel this is worth thinking about, not only because EFN will have priorities to consider, but also because we sometimes have to talk with people who don't really understand what makes folk music tick. And I'm not always sure that we're great at explaining what makes it different and how these differences have real value in specific contexts. It appears to me that the impetus to make music appears to be spread throughout all societies and all social stratas. But for many people, the time available to practice musical skills was limited by the needs of labor. But the impetus to make music remained as strong, and the needs of communities for music remained as real, whatever the working lives of individuals. So for many generations, traditional music has been a major means of artistic expression for ordinary people. And it has developed to fill their musical needs and aspirations. And it's wonderful stuff. When I first heard Billy Pigg, the great Northumbrian piper, play the pipes, when I first heard Jeannie Robertson sing, when I first saw Johnson Elwood dance, I was amazed. Now today I listen to a wide range of musical genres, but still when I listen to recordings of my heroes, or I go to a concert and hear today's singers presenting those old songs, they still hit me as strongly as ever. Because this music's good. That subtle interplay of phrasing, dynamics and decoration that a singer will employ to bring the story to life can, I feel, produce as intense an experience as any Schubert lieder. the tiny inflections that a fiddle player will bring to an old jig can hold an audience as entranced as a Bach partita. I remember very well, I took Will Atkinson, Will Taylor and Joe Hutton, three of the older musicians and shepherds by profession from Northumberland, to play a concert with the Lindsay String Quartet. And it was mainly a classical audience. Now, when Will Atkinson played a solo on his little Chinese harmonica, he was armed with only that small, quiet, diatonic instrument and a series of 4- and 8-bar phrases, but the way he played it, judging the start and end of every note to the millisecond, the degree of attack, the precise weight of each note relative to those around it, indeed, the changing dynamic within the note, all this set within a dance-orientated rhythmic structure which had the flexibility of pulse to allow each individual phrase to breathe, to be shaped, to draw us into his particular vision of each melody. It just put a complete spell on the audience. And Peter Cropper, who was the leader of that string quartet, one of the leaders in the country at the time, he leaned across to me and said, that is greatness. So he recognized, without necessarily understanding, he recognized that this was something special within folk music. The stuff is that good. Personally, I feel that if this were a complete museum culture, a completely static body of songs and tunes and dances, it would still be worth performing because it's that good. But as we all know, it is so much more than just a museum culture. It is an evolving form changed by each generation. And it has evolved as a highly flexible form, a series of apparently simple building blocks set in a stylistic framework that allows tremendous scope for individual input across a wide range of technical skill levels. Great performers can take us on flights of fancy equal to anything you could find in other musics, while others of more moderate skills may have just a couple of songs that they really get inside and add something of themselves to, with the result that they can rivet us afresh with a song even if we know it well. This music is designed to have room for personal stylistic input from an early stage, and that can be a great asset in teaching situations. A feeling of ownership and real involvement can grow early in the process. Of course, that does mean that teachers of traditional music need to understand the appropriate stylistic vocabulary current within any particular tradition. And it also raises real questions about the teaching process. The interaction between the musical material, the songs, the tunes, or the dance, and that subtle stylistic vocabulary that is used to bring it to life is central to what folk music and traditional music how it works. And there's something I find wonderful about the process, the way ideas move between musicians, singers and dancers, ideas carried within old tunes, hidden in new twists of a song, or running through the steps of a dance. The free exchange of ideas, of energies freely given, freely accepted. This transfer of energies and ideas is amazing to be part of. I love it. It could be seen as like molecules in a gas, bouncing off each other and exchanging energy at each contact. But it's a bit more than that. As at the point of transfer of ideas, extra energy is produced. The momentum grows with the exchange of ideas. So it's not just like molecules in a gas. Perhaps it's even something like a controlled nuclear reaction. But for that, of course, you do need a critical mass. And building a critical mass of participants in our communities across Europe is perhaps one of the things that Spring Forward is all about. Of course, it's not a museum culture, but at its best, the work of previous generations underpins the present and provides ideas to fuel developments for the future. Millions of man and woman hours of work have gone into developing this amazing rich scenes of song, dances and tunes, and the hugely varied stylistic vocabulary through which they have been realized over the years. Many singers, musicians and dancers today enrich their work through a deep understanding of the tradition gained from long exposure and study, but slavish copying would tend to deny the creativity of previous generations by suggesting that they didn't build on the work of their forebears. So we tend to put something of ourselves into the mix. Sometimes this contribution may be microscopic, sometimes quite radical. And who is to say which will prove to be the most important in the long run? I often hear people wondering if this particular new idea or that latest fashion might be dangerous for the future of a tradition. I remember talking about it years ago to Bert Lloyd, the great folklorist A.L. Lloyd, and he calmed my fears. He suggested, no, a healthy tradition is like a self-writing lifeboat. A self-writing lifeboat, he said. Sometimes it may seem to be about to be swamped by new ideas, but it takes what it needs and lets the rest drop away. The critical words here are surely a healthy tradition. And a healthy tradition does need a critical mass of participants. And although star performers may start new great ideas, I feel the real engine of the tradition is held by the huge network of singers, players, and dancers who absorb some new ideas, polish them with that patina of use. It is this broad community of dancers, singers, and players who hold the value systems that invisibly underpin this form. And they, by taking up or dropping new facets of the tradition, help establish what might go forward and be current in 20, 50, and 100 years' time. Some of the ideas we seem excited about now may have fallen by the wayside, and some other little quirk of timing that appeared almost unnoticed may be established as the essence of a tradition in 50 years' time. And I might add, when we're thinking about this great swell of the grassroots, as it were, I may add that many of the professional performers that I know feel that they need contact with these grassroots in order to keep their own music stimulated. It is perhaps then not the duty of as individual musicians to define the direction of the tradition. If we have a duty, it is to build a healthy tradition seaworthy enough for the next generation. And I feel there is no dichotomy between professional performance and the community potential of this music. Indeed, these two strands, the professional and the grassroots, both depend on each other. We live in a world of mass media and a huge entertainment industry. We cannot ignore it. Success, or imagined success, is one of the main weapons in popular music marketing. Now, I feel that real, personal, face-to-face contact is our main defense to some of that. At least it will be once COVID's through again. However, even a modicum of perceived success, even an occasional stamp of media approval generated by great performers on a high-profile stage can help erode the inhibitions that stop new people getting near to this music and getting involved and getting to that important face-to-face contact. The dynamic between active participants, and be they high flyers or those of more modest ambition, the dynamic between them and the communities they serve is also integral to how folk arts work. The communities that form the context of much of the performance of folk arts today may appear very different to what we think of as the original host communities of this material. And indeed, the lives of my great friends and mentors, Will Atkinson, Joe Hutton, and Will Taylor, were very, very different to mine. When I picked them up to drive to some event, the conversation as we drove away was a litany of every field we passed, recollecting who worked there, who they were married to, who they went to school, if they danced or grew fine potatoes or wrestled at the annual show. Subconsciously or not, those men kept an awareness of the networks they lived in very fresh in their minds. And this did seem to give them a certain rootedness that some would say could be heard in the music. Now, are these old networks just part of a lost way of life? Well, we still do live in networks. It's true that the The points of crossing, the points of meeting within the networks are less frequent than in a village life of old, when each person was connected to others on several planes of a multi-layered network. That's not so much the case today. However, if I go to a housing estate in Newcastle, I can find that some people will have children at the same school, some will shop at the same supermarket, some may support the same sports teams, some may want to raise funds for a shared course, and a community-based traditional music event, such as a ceilidh led by the school ceilidh band, with the parents running the bar and other students making posters or running the PA. This can provide just such an extra point of crossing. Now, school concerts are always great things. A school orchestra might put on an excellent concert, but I'm afraid it will always be a long way second to a professional orchestra. Whereas in a school ceilidh, where some kids are in the band, there are songs from the school folk groups, and their friends and parents are all dancing, that event, that dance, can be equal to the best ceilidh in the land, because its success is a result of the overall chemistry of the night, because everybody in the room is involved in building the energy. Such additional crossroads in life's network can help us in little ways, I feel, to establish who we are in this world. In a world where we are under constant pressure to abdicate our powers of choice to opinion formers and fashion, more and more we are invited to be passive consumers, further and further removed from the point where anything is made. Self-made music, and traditional music in particular, gives us all tools that can help establish ourselves and our place in communities. I well remember Stan Reeves of Edinburgh's Adult Learning Project talking passionately about what he called disenculturalisation in the housing schemes around the city, where he said, people can't make anything. They can't cook food, they can't sew, they can't use simple hand tools, they don't write letters, they've never seen a live performance of any kind. So encouraging people in those situations to be involved in artistic activity is really difficult. But Stan found that traditional music worked remarkably well because of the potential for personal input at an early stage, because of the feeling of sharing, because of the common ownership of the material and of the underlying value systems. If we want to take our place in the 21st century, alongside all the other wonderful genres of music, song and dance, we need to build on the strengths of folk music, its flexibility, its range of emotional engagement, and the huge potential for personal and communal creativity. As EFN goes forward and seeks funding for exciting new projects, how can we ensure that funders or collaborators from other genres or other art forms gain some real insight into the special qualities of folk arts? How can we explain how these qualities have arisen, what strengths they bring, how they can be overlooked, squashed and undermined? How do we explain that artistic excellence and grassroots involvement are absolutely interlinked and that they feed off each other? How do we explain that some vital features of excellence may be difficult to define? They may be microscopic in detail, but major in effect. The apparently simple can be infinitely subtle. If I can take for a moment an example from a very different tradition. The Japanese visual artist who can conjure something wonderful from a few simple lines with brush and ink is not in competition with the great painter in oils. Both require incredible skill, but the apparent simplicity of the ink sketch requires amazing subtlety and precision to make an equivalent impact as the huge oil canvas. And who can say which is harder to achieve? Does it require more artistry to hold attention with the obviously complex or with the apparently simple? We need to make these those new to traditional music. Think about that. So EFN will be faced with making decisions. What are the questions they will have to consider, the balances they need to strike? How can we facilitate people understanding of quality folk art and raise their aspirations to fly high while also accommodating participation and engagement at all levels and all abilities? Do we need to highlight some of the things that might be lost? When we support young artists, how can we best feed their roots as well as giving them a chance to branch out? How can we develop young promoters who can create performance environments attractive to new young audiences? Are there opportunities in cultural tourism? And if so, how do we avoid some serious potential pitfalls there? Now, also be prepared to fight your corner. Yes, collaborate with other forms and other genres, but be supportive of fellow practitioners from other forms, but don't be afraid to stand up for folk music. And what's more, learn how the systems work so you can advocate effectively. Although EFN will need to develop projects that provide work for professional musicians, they can also focus on the long-term impact. Does it inspire new people? Are there elements that help to skill up others? Today, as we tease out pointers and principles that might help the EFN realize the potential of collaborations across our continent, we have to be realistic, but also ambitious. The potential for the folk arts in the 21st century is there in its very DNA, in the way it evolved in the hands of ordinary women and men. The energy is waiting to be released. Given half a chance, new generations will respond to it. Hey, thanks very much.